Hey everyone, tonight we're going to dim the lights, maybe light some imaginary copal incense, and journey deep into the jungle canopies of ancient Mesoamerica to explore the quirky sleep habits of the ancient Mayans. Imagine, if you will, the cool, humid air of the rainforest night, the distant calls of jaguars, and the rhythmic chirping of insects as you settle down for rest, not on a plush mattress, but perhaps swaying gently in a woven net suspended between two posts. This isn't just about how they close their eyes. It's about how an entire civilization deeply connected to the cosmos and the earth understood and experienced the most fundamental human need. You probably wouldn't survive a single night in a classic Mayan household without feeling utterly disoriented and perhaps a bit itchy. Your soft mattress, your quiet room, your personal space, all would be foreign concepts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments. It's always fun to see how far our little historical journeys reach. Like and follow the channel to continue waiting for the next exciting parts. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you, our intrepid explorer of ancient slumber, begin to settle into the rhythms of Maya night, you quickly realize that their approach to sleep was profoundly different from our own. Forget the solitary, silent cocoon of a modern bedroom. For the ancient Maya, rest was often a far more communal, open, and integrated part of their daily and nightly existence. Their world didn't simply shut down when the sun set. It transformed, offering a new set of challenges and opportunities for rest and activity. Consider for a moment the natural environment that shaped their sleep. The humid tropical climate meant that heavy bedding or enclosed spaces for warmth weren't always necessary and indeed could be uncomfortable. This leads us to a mainstream historical fact. The vast majority of ancient Maya people did not sleep in what we would recognize as beds. Instead, evidence suggests they primarily used woven mats, elevated platforms, or most famously, hammocks. This simple fact immediately paints a picture of a more open, less structured sleeping environment than we're accustomed to. It's a bit like trying to imagine a world without pillows. The very concept of bedtime takes on a whole new meaning. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while we think of hammocks as leisurely vacation items for the Maya, they were practical, everyday furniture. They allowed for air circulation, keeping sleepers cool in the tropical heat, and also offered some protection from ground-dwelling insects and small animals. Some hammocks were likely woven so tightly they could hold water, but others were more open weave, providing maximum breathability. Historians still argue whether the invention of the hammock was driven purely by practical needs for comfort and pest control, or if it also held deeper cultural or symbolic significance, perhaps related to a feeling of suspension between worlds. It's enough to make you wonder if your camping hammock could be a direct descendant of a royal Maya design. You certainly wouldn't expect to find a queen sleeping on a firm, flat board. The Maya lived in societies deeply attuned to the natural world. Their homes, typically single-room structures made of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs, were not designed for individual privacy in the way modern houses are. The concept of a personal bedroom was largely absent. Instead, the entire living space might transform into a sleeping area at night. Families would likely spread mats or hang hammocks within this communal space, sharing the warmth and security of collective presence. This would mean that the sounds of the night, the rustling jungle, distant animal calls, perhaps even the soft breathing of family members, were an intrinsic part of their sleep environment. It's a far cry from blocking out every sound with earplugs and blackout curtains, isn't it? Their nights were alive even in slumber. As you continue to adjust to the humid communal stillness of a Maya night, your very means of rest becomes the next focal point. Hammocks, the swaying slumber. These deceptively simple pieces of woven material were far more than just comfortable places to lie down. They were ingenious inventions, perfectly suited to the Mesoamerican environment, embodying a unique blend of practicality, comfort, and perhaps even spiritual significance. They weren't just for siestas, they were central to their nightly repose. A mainstream historical fact about hammocks is their pre-Columbian origin and widespread use across Mesoamerica and the Caribbean. Long before Europeans discovered them, indigenous peoples had perfected the art of weaving these suspended beds from various materials, most commonly cotton henequen, a type of agave fiber, or even bark. The earliest archaeological evidence of hammocks in the Maya region points to their use centuries before the arrival of the Spanish. This wasn't some niche sleeping solution. It was a fundamental part of daily life optimized for the climate. Imagine trying to introduce a bulky wooden bed frame into a society that had already mastered the art of suspended sleep. It certainly makes you appreciate ancient ingenuity. For a quirky tidbit, consider the comfort and hygiene benefits of sleeping in a hammock. The gentle swaying motion was believed by some to be soothing and conducive to deep sleep, almost like a natural rocking cradle. More practically, being suspended off the ground offered significant advantages. It protected sleepers from crawling insects, snakes, and other unwelcome creatures that might venture into a dwelling at night. It also allowed for maximum air circulation, preventing overheating in the tropical climate, a far cry from the stuffy enclosed beds often found in cooler climates. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for hammock adoption was comfort pest control or a combination of both, perhaps with spiritual beliefs mixed in, such as feeling suspended between earth and sky. It's enough to make you reconsider your expensive memory foam mattress for a simpler, breezier alternative. You certainly wouldn't expect them to be complaining about bedbugs. The construction of these hammocks varied. Some were tightly woven for durability and strength, capable of supporting multiple individuals, or even serving as makeshift carrying devices during the day. Others might have been more loosely woven for maximum airflow. The fibers themselves were often naturally hypoallergenic, and the open weave meant they dried quickly after humid nights or even a gentle rain. This adaptability made them ideal for a lifestyle that blurred the lines between indoor and outdoor living. Setting up a hammock was relatively simple. Two strong anchor points were all that was needed, often sturdy posts within the home, or trees if sleeping outdoors during certain activities. This ease of setup and portability meant that a Maya family could easily adjust their sleeping arrangements based on season temperature or social needs. You could even imagine entire villages moving their beds temporarily during major festivals or agricultural cycles, adapting their sleep environment to the demands of community life. The sensation of sleeping in a hammock even today is unique. The gentle curve supports the body in a way that can alleviate pressure points, and the subtle sway can be incredibly relaxing. For the Maya, this wasn't just about physical comfort. It might have influenced their psychological state, promoting a sense of calm and connection to the rhythms of nature. Think about the feeling of being gently rocked, almost like being cradled by the earth itself. It suggests a very different approach to rest than our static, firmly grounded sleep. It certainly makes your quest for the perfect mattress seem a bit overcomplicated, doesn't it? With the gentle sway of the hammock now a familiar sensation, you begin to perceive how the ancient Maya's sleep was not merely a physical necessity, but was profoundly intertwined with their perception of time, sleep cycles, and solar rhythms. Unlike our reliance on artificial light and alarm clocks, the Maya's nightly rest was dictated almost entirely by the natural cadence of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Their lives, and thus their sleep, were in exquisite synchronicity with the cosmos. A mainstream historical fact that illustrates this connection is the Maya's advanced understanding of astronomy and their reliance on precise calendrical systems. They meticulously tracked the movements of celestial bodies, using this knowledge not only for religious rituals and agricultural cycles, but also for structuring their daily and nightly activities. The setting of the sun marked the end of the active workday, signaling a time for communal gatherings, storytelling, and eventually preparation for rest. The absence of widespread artificial lighting meant that true darkness, a concept we rarely experience in modern cities, enveloped their settlements. Imagine your day literally ending when the sun dipped below the horizon, with no bright screens or electric lights to prolong your waking hours. It certainly made the concept of just one more episode utterly alien. For a quirky tidbit, consider the idea of segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, which many historians believe was common for the Maya, as it was for many pre-industrial societies. Instead of one long unbroken stretch of sleep, people would often sleep for a few hours, after sunset wake for a period in the middle of the night, for various activities, socializing, quiet work, tending fires, or perhaps even engaging in spiritual practices, and then returned to sleep until dawn. This wasn't insomnia, it was a natural adaptation to the patterns of natural light and the social opportunities afforded by the cooler nighttime hours. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern was a conscious cultural choice or simply an inevitable consequence of living without artificial light. It's enough to make you wonder if your occasional middle-of-the-night wake-up is actually a throwback to ancient human habits. You certainly wouldn't expect them to be hitting snooze multiple times. The deep darkness of the Maya night also meant that the stars were incredibly prominent, serving as a natural clock and compass. Without the light pollution we contend with, the Milky Way would have stretched across the sky in breathtaking clarity. The rising and setting of specific constellations might have signaled particular times for waking or sleeping, especially for those involved in agricultural planning or astronomical observation. Their internal body clocks or circadian rhythms would have been finely tuned to these cosmic cycles, promoting a more natural and perhaps more restorative sleep than our often disrupted modern patterns. The quality of sleep, too, would have been influenced by the prevailing sounds and temperatures of the night. As the sun set, the intense heat of the day would gradually dissipate, bringing cooler, more comfortable temperatures conducive to rest. The jungle, far from being silent, would have offered a symphony of natural sounds, the rustling of leaves, the croaking of frogs, the distant calls of nocturnal animals. These sounds, rather than being jarring, would have been the familiar lullaby of their world, deeply ingrained in their subconscious as signals of rest. The absence of rigid work schedules dictated by industrial clocks meant that Mayans could afford to let their sleep patterns ebb and flow more naturally with the demands of their agricultural and ceremonial calendars. While some nights might have been shortened by rituals or urgent tasks, others would have allowed for prolonged periods of rest, guided by the body's natural need for sleep rather than an external schedule. It was a fluid, adaptive approach to slumber, deeply connected to the pulse of the living world around them. This inherent connection to natural rhythms suggests a less stressed, perhaps more attuned way of life than our own constant battle against the clock. As the gentle sway of your hammock and the soft sounds of the jungle lull you into a state of deep relaxation, your awareness shifts to another profound aspect of Maya sleep: dream worlds and divine messages. For the ancient Maya, dreams were far more than random nocturnal brain activity. They were considered sacred portals, direct conduits to the spirit world, the ancestors, and even the gods themselves. To ignore a dream was to potentially miss a crucial prophecy, a divine instruction, or a warning from the cosmos. A mainstream historical fact highlighting this belief is the prominence of divination and prophecy in Maya culture. Rulers, priests, and shamans meticulously observed celestial events, interpreted omens, and crucially sought guidance through altered states of consciousness, including those accessed through dreams. Dream interpreters held significant sway, as their ability to decipher these cryptic nocturnal narratives was vital for making decisions about warfare, agriculture rituals, and even the everyday lives of the people. Imagine waking up and wondering if your weird dream about a jaguar meant you should plant corn today or avoid a certain path. It certainly made your morning coffee scroll seem utterly trivial by comparison. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya belief in soul wandering during sleep. Some ethnographic accounts and interpretations of ancient texts suggest that the Maya believed a part of the soul, or chulel, could leave the body during dreams, journeying to other realms or encountering spirits. This wandering soul could bring back knowledge, warnings, or even interact with the souls of the deceased. This concept gave dreams a tangible, almost physical reality, making them experiences as significant as waking life. Historians still argue whether this belief in soul wandering was a widespread literal interpretation or a metaphorical understanding of the dream state. It's enough to make you wonder what adventures your own soul might be having while you're catching Z's. You certainly wouldn't expect them to dismiss a vivid dream as just a dream. The content of dreams was often meticulously recalled and discussed, especially within elite circles. Royal inscriptions and iconography sometimes depict rulers communing with ancestors or deities, often through what are believed to be trance or dream states. These visionary experiences were not just personal, They often had implications for the entire community, guiding political decisions or validating a ruler's divine right. A vivid dream of a maize god, for example, might be interpreted as a blessing for a bountiful harvest, while a dream of a monstrous creature could signal impending danger. To facilitate auspicious dreams, certain practices might have been undertaken before sleep. This could include fasting, consuming specific ritual foods, or even engaging in light forms of trance-inducing activities to open the mind to spiritual communication. Some scholars even suggest that certain plants known for their psychoactive properties might have been used in controlled ceremonial contexts to induce vivid, meaningful dreams, though this remains an area of specialized debate. The Maya saw the night not as an empty void, but as a time brimming with other forms of life and activity, both seen and unseen. The veil between worlds was considered thinnest during these hours, making dreams a natural extension of their spiritual cosmology. This integrated view meant that sleep was not simply a period of unconsciousness, but an active, vital part of their spiritual and intellectual life. It was a time for receiving wisdom, forging connections beyond the mundane, and tapping into a deeper understanding of the universe. This rich interpretation of dreams stands in stark contrast to our modern, often dismissive view of nocturnal wanderings. It truly made every night an adventure into the unknown. As the echoes of divine dreams gently fade from your mind, you become aware that the Maya night was not exclusively for rest and revelation. It was also a crucial time for ritual. Thus we turn our gaze to nocturnal rituals and offerings. When the sun dipped below the horizon, cloaking the jungle in deep shadow, specific ceremonies and acts of devotion often commenced, conducted under the watchful eyes of the stars and the unseen spirits of the night. A mainstream historical fact that underscores the significance of these nocturnal activities is the Rani Maya's practice of bloodletting rituals. While perhaps unsettling to modern sensibilities, these auto-sacrificial acts, often involving piercing the tongue, earlobes, or even the genitals with obsidian blades or stingray spines, were deeply sacred. Performed by rulers and elites, often at night or dawn, these rituals were believed to open a portal to the spirit world, allowing communication with deities and ancestors. The shedding of precious blood was considered the ultimate offering, vital for maintaining cosmic balance and ensuring the well-being of the community. Imagine the profound silence of the night, broken only by the hushed movements of priests and the solemn rhythm of these profound ceremonies. It certainly puts a different spin on your idea of a peaceful evening. For a quirky tidbit, consider the offerings made to nocturnal deities or spirits. The Maya believed specific deities held sway over the night, the moon, and the underworld. To appease these powerful entities and ensure a safe passage through the darkness, offerings might be left at household shrines or specific outdoor locations. These could include small effigies, copal incense, a fragrant resin often burned for purification and communication with the gods, and even portions of food. Historians still argue whether the timing of these offerings was strictly tied to astronomical events or if it was more flexibly adapted to individual and community needs throughout the night. It's enough to make you wonder if your midnight snack is a distant echo of an ancient offering. You certainly wouldn't expect them to just light a candle and hope for the best. These nocturnal rituals were not necessarily grand public spectacles like daytime ceremonies held in city plazas. Often they were more intimate, solemn affairs conducted within temples, private courtyards, or even individual homes. The darkness provided a veil of privacy, enhancing the sacredness and intensity of the experience. Priests and shamans might enter trance states, commune with spirits, or interpret omens under the shroud of night, leveraging the unique energy and perceived thinness of the veil between worlds during these hours. The act of burning copal incense, a common nighttime offering, would have filled the air with a distinct, sweet, earthy aroma, creating a sensory landscape deeply associated with ritual and connection to the divine. The smoke curling upwards was seen as a pathway for prayers and offerings to reach the heavens. This contrasts sharply with our modern preference for quiet, dark sleep. For the Maya, the night was often a time of heightened spiritual engagement, a continuous conversation with the unseen forces that govern their lives. Even for ordinary people, the night might involve smaller personal acts of devotion, perhaps a quiet prayer before settling into the hammock, a small offering of maize kernels left at a household altar, or a moment of contemplation under the star-strewn sky. These practices were woven into the fabric of their lives, blurring the lines between waking and sleeping, the mundane and the sacred. The Maya night was a dynamic space active with spiritual energy where both rest and profound ritual coexisted. It certainly adds a layer of depth to the simple act of going to bed, doesn't it? As the last wisp of copal smoke disperses into the Maya night, you notice that even the physical act of settling down for sleep is different from your own solitary habit. Here in the ancient Maya world, sleep was often a shared experience, leading us to one communal sleeping arrangements. The typical Maya home, often a single-room dwelling, was not compartmentalized with individual bedrooms. Instead, the entire family and sometimes extended kin would share the same space for resting, creating a constant sense of proximity and collective presence. A mainstream historical fact reinforcing this communal aspect is the architectural layout of common Maya homes. Archaeological excavations of residential compounds often reveal clusters of small, single-room structures around a central patio or courtyard, suggesting multi-generational family units. Within these individual structures, there's little evidence of internal divisions that would create private sleeping quarters. This strongly indicates that families slept together in one large area, adapting their space for various activities throughout the day and night. Imagine trying to get a moment of peace and quiet in a room shared with your entire family, where everyone's snores and sleep-talking become part of the nightly symphony. It certainly made family bonding a round-the-clock affair, whether you liked it or not. For a quirky tidbit, consider your comfort and security offered by communal sleep in a jungle environment. While we might value individual space, sleeping together would have provided warmth on cooler nights and, perhaps more importantly, a collective sense of safety against potential threats, whether from wild animals or human intruders. The shared breathing and presence of family members would have been a constant, reassuring rhythm. Historians still argue whether this communal sleeping was primarily a practical adaptation to climate and security needs, or if it reflected deeper social values of family cohesion and interdependence. It's enough to make you reconsider your isolated bedroom and perhaps yearn for the subtle comfort of shared vulnerability. You certainly wouldn't expect a single guard dog to be sufficient protection. Within these shared spaces, the hammocks and woven mats, as we've discussed, would have been arranged. Perhaps the parents would sleep centrally with younger children nestled close by, and older children or grandparents finding their spots near the edges of the room. This close proximity meant that the waking and sleeping patterns of one individual would inevitably affect others. A crying infant, an elder rising for a nocturnal ritual, or someone tending the fire would all be part of the shared nightly experience. The sounds of communal sleep would have been varied: the soft breathing, the occasional cough, the rustle of movements as someone adjusted their position. These weren't disturbances, but rather the familiar backdrop of family life, deeply ingrained into their subconscious as the sounds of safety and belonging. It would have fostered a different kind of awareness, a subtle attentiveness to the rhythms of the household, even in sleep. This communal arrangement also influenced social dynamics. Privacy, as we understand it, was a luxury rarely afforded. Personal boundaries would have been defined differently, with a greater emphasis on collective well-being and shared experience. Even intimate moments between spouses would have required extreme discretion, perhaps occurring during quiet periods when others were deeply asleep or when the home was temporarily less populated. The concept of alone time would have been a fleeting luxury found perhaps during solitary walks or quiet moments of contemplation during the day. It's a stark reminder that our highly individualized approach to sleep is a relatively modern invention, a stark contrast to the shared slumber of the ancient Maya. As the gentle hum of communal breathing fades, you shift your focus to a striking absence in the Maya sleeping landscape: the absence of beds. When you envision an ancient Mayan home, banish all thoughts of elevated wooden frames, mattresses, or headboards. The very concept of what we consider a bed in the European tradition was simply non-existent in their culture, a testament to their unique architectural adaptations, material availability, and environmental conditions. A mainstream historical fact that supports this observation is the archaeological lack of skeletal remains associated with raised bed structures within common residential dwellings. While some elite burials might feature stone platforms, these are interpreted as funerary structures, not everyday sleeping furniture. Excavations consistently reveal simple earthen floors or low platforms that would have supported mats or hammocks, but no evidence of dedicated frame sleeping units akin to those found in ancient European or Asian contexts. Imagine trying to explain to a modern furniture salesperson that you simply wanted a floor space and a hanging net for your nightly repose. It certainly made mattress shopping a delightfully simple affair. For a quirky tidbit, consider the ingenious simplicity of one-elevated sleeping platforms made of packed earth or stone. In some Maya homes, low built-in platforms, just a few inches or a foot off the ground, have been discovered. These weren't beds in our sense, but rather stable raised surfaces designed to keep sleepers away from ground moisture and provide a slightly firmer base for woven mats. They offered a subtle elevation enough to mitigate some discomfort without the complexity of a frame structure. Historians still argue whether these platforms were a precursor to more complex bedding or simply a practical variation of ground sleeping designed for specific environmental conditions or for people who preferred a firmer surface than a hammock. It's enough to make you wonder if your minimalist floor bed is actually a nod to ancient Maya design. You certainly wouldn't expect to find a carved wooden headboard. The primary reasons for the absence of beds were multifold. Firstly, the tropical climate meant that heavy insulated bedding was largely unnecessary for warmth. In fact, elevated air circulating solutions, like hammocks or simple mats, were far more practical for comfort in the heat and humidity. Secondly, the materials readily available to the Maya wood reeds, cotton and other plant fibers, lent themselves naturally to weaving hammocks and mats, or to constructing simple earthen structures. The large-scale timber, processing and carpentry, required for frame beds while possible, wasn't a cultural priority for domestic furnishings. Furthermore, the Maya's more communal and flexible approach to living space meant that permanent, bulky furniture might have been impractical. Hammocks could be easily hung and unhung mats, rolled up and stored, allowing the single-room dwelling to serve multiple functions throughout the day: a living area, a workspace, and at night a sleeping quarter. This adaptability contrasted sharply with the fixed, dedicated bedroom found in many other cultures. This lack of traditional beds suggests a deep integration with the natural world and a reliance on materials and designs that were both sustainable and perfectly suited to their environment. Their sleep technology was rooted in simplicity and efficiency rather than elaborate construction or material excess. It challenges our modern assumptions about comfort and necessity, reminding us that different cultures find rest in remarkably diverse ways. It certainly made moving house a significantly lighter endeavor, didn't it? As you appreciate the ingenious simplicity of sleeping without traditional beds, your attention naturally turns to how this lack of fixed furniture, combined with other factors, played into the subtle dynamics of sleep and social status. In a society as stratified as the ancient Maya, even the seemingly mundane act of sleep carried markers of one's position, revealing distinctions between the common farmer and the ruling elite, the artisan and the priest. While everyone slept, how and where they slept could speak volumes. A mainstream historical fact that highlights social stratification in Maya society is the distinct differences in residential architecture between commoners and elites. Commoners lived in simpler, often single-room, wattle and daub houses with thatched roofs, as we've discussed. Elites, on the other hand, resided in multi-room masonry structures, sometimes within palace compounds, often featuring plastered walls, painted murals, and even internal courtyards. This fundamental difference in dwelling size and construction naturally influenced sleeping arrangements, even if the core technology mats and hammocks remain similar. Imagine the difference between sleeping in a cozy shared hut versus a multi-room stone dwelling, even if both use hammocks. It certainly made the concept of upstairs-downstairs much more rudimentary. For a quirky tidbit, consider the quality and adornment of sleeping textiles. While everyone might use hammocks or mats, the materials and craftsmanship would have varied significantly with social status. A commoner's hammock might be woven from coarse henequen fiber, utilitarian and durable. A ruler's hammock, however, could be made of finely woven cotton, perhaps dyed with vibrant, expensive pigments like Maya blue, or even adorned with intricate patterns, feathers, or shell ornaments. The mats, too, could range from simple reed weaves to intricately patterned soft cotton textiles. Historians still argue whether these luxurious sleeping accoutrements were purely for comfort and display, or if they also held symbolic power connecting the sleeper to divine authority or ancestral prestige. It's enough to make you reconsider the humble thread count of your own bed sheets. You certainly wouldn't expect a king to be sleeping on a rough, scratchy mat. Beyond the materials, the location of sleep within a dwelling could also indicate status. In elite residences, while still communal by our standards, there might have been designated areas within larger rooms or specific alcoves that provided a degree of privacy or preferential positioning, perhaps near a cool breeze or a specific entrance. A ruler might have a particularly large or finely crafted hammock positioned centrally, signifying their importance even in repose. The presence of attendants or guards too marked social distinction. While commoners relied on the communal safety of their family unit, rulers and high-ranking nobles would have had guards or servants nearby even during the night, ensuring their security and readiness for any nocturnal duties or emergencies. This continuous vigilance around an elite sleeper underscores their elevated position and the constant threats they might face. Furthermore, the access to light and warmth could subtly denote status. While everyone relied on natural light, elite residences might have had access to more abundant or higher quality fuel for fires, allowing for longer periods of light after dark, for reading, writing, or conducting late-night affairs. These small comforts, when accumulated, painted a clear picture of differentiated lifestyles even in the quiet hours of the night. Sleep, then, was not a great equalizer. It was another stage upon which the complex hierarchy of Maya society was subtly yet powerfully performed. It certainly put a lot more meaning into where you chose to hang your hammock, didn't it? With the subtle stratification of adult sleep habits now revealed, your curiosity naturally extends to the smallest members of Maya society, children's sleep in early life. How did the ancient Maya, with their communal arrangements and lack of traditional beds, approach the rest of their infants and young children? It turns out their methods were deeply integrated with family life and designed to foster development within their specific cultural context. A mainstream historical fact that profoundly impacted children's early sleep was the more practice of swaddling infants. While not unique to the Maya, archaeological evidence and ethnographic accounts from descendant cultures suggest that Maya babies were often tightly swaddled or wrapped in cloth, limiting their movement. This practice was believed to provide a sense of security, mimic the womb, and keep the infant warm. It also perhaps made it easier for parents to manage multiple children in a communal sleeping space. Imagine being so snugly wrapped that your ability to wiggle was almost entirely restricted from birth. It certainly made the concept of a freeform baby blanket seem quite radical. For a quirky tidbit, consider the immediate proximity of infants to caregivers, even during sleep. Unlike some modern practices that advocate for separate nurseries, Maya infants and young children would have almost certainly slept in very close proximity to their parents, often in the same hammock or on an adjacent mat. This co-sleeping or family bed arrangement facilitated easy breastfeeding, immediate comfort for a crying child, and a constant reassuring physical presence. Historians still argue whether this close proximity was purely a practical necessity due to living conditions, or if it reflected deeper cultural values, emphasizing constant parental presence and attachment. It's enough to make you wonder if your separate cribs and baby monitors are truly what's natural. You certainly wouldn't expect a Maya baby to have its own private sleeping chamber. The rhythm of a Maya child's sleep would have been deeply influenced by the segmented sleep patterns of adults. Infants would have awakened frequently for feeding, but as they grew, they would likely have adapted to the household's middle-of-the-night awake period, joining in quiet activities or simply observing from their sleeping place before drifting back to sleep. This constant exposure to the family's nighttime routine would have naturally shaped their own sleep cycles. Toddlers and young children, too, would have been part of the communal sleeping landscape. They might have shared hammocks with siblings or parents, or had their own small mats placed nearby. The concept of a child sleeping alone in a separate room would have been utterly alien and likely seen as neglectful or unsafe. The sounds of the household, even at night, would have been a constant gentle hum, fostering a sense of security rather than disturbance. Discipline around sleep for children would have focused on quiet compliance and integration into the family's rhythm. While there wouldn't have been bedtime stories in the modern sense, oral traditions, myths, and legends might have been shared in hushed tones as families settled down for the night, lulling children to sleep with the rich narratives of their culture. The transition to sleep would have been a gradual, natural winding down, enveloped by the sights and sounds of the family unit. This integrated approach to children's sleep highlights a profound difference in parenting philosophies. Instead of creating separate controlled sleep environments, the Maya embraced the natural flow of family life, allowing children to learn about rest, security, and community simply by being a part of it from their very first nights. It certainly made the modern elaborate sleep training methods seem rather complicated, didn't it? Having observed the communal and integrated sleep of Maya children, you now ponder a more specific aspect of their rest. Posture for rest, sitting or lying. While we instinctively associate sleep with lying flat, the ancient Maya, particularly in certain contexts or for specific purposes, might have adopted various resting positions that blur our modern distinctions between sitting, reclining, and full slumber. Their bodies accustomed to different forms of labor and rest likely adapted to more diverse ways of finding repose. A mainstream historical fact that hints at varied postures is the evidence of low benches or platforms in Maya dwellings and public buildings. While not beds, these stone or packed earth structures would have served as seating during the day but could easily have been used for reclining or semi-sitting positions for rest during the night or for short periods of repose during the day. This suggests that lying down for sleep might not always have meant a completely horizontal posture, especially for naps or brief breaks. Imagine finding comfort in a semi-upright position for a quick doze, something many of us might find difficult without external support. It certainly made the distinction between furniture for sitting and furniture for sleeping less clear-cut. For a quirky tidbit, consider the symbolism of resting postures in Maya art. While depictions of full sleep are rare, some Maya iconography shows figures in seated or semi-reclined positions that appear to be contemplative or resting. These might be gods, ancestors, or rulers, suggesting that certain dignified or spiritual forms of repose could involve a more upright posture than a full sprawl. Historians still argue whether these depictions are literal representations of how people slept or if they are primarily symbolic, conveying a state of contemplation or readiness even in rest. It's enough to make you wonder if your favorite armchair nap is a subconscious echo of an ancient Maya king's meditative rest. You certainly wouldn't expect to see a fully prostrate figure in a formal depiction of contemplation. For most commoners, using hammocks, a horizontal or slightly curved lying position would have been typical, conforming to the hammock's natural shape. However, mats on earthen floors or low platforms could accommodate a wider range of positions. For a quick rest during the day or perhaps a segment of sleep during the night's awake period, a person might have simply leaned against a wall, sat with their knees drawn up, or reclined on a low bench. These less than fully prone positions could offer a sense of alertness, even while resting, allowing for quick transitions back to activity or vigilance. The physical demands of Maya life, including extensive walking, carrying loads, and agricultural labor, might have also influenced preferred resting postures. Different positions could alleviate specific strains or offer targeted relief for weary muscles. For example, a semi-sitting position might have been more comfortable for someone with certain back ailments or for a mother needing to tend to a child. Furthermore, in social or ritual contexts, maintaining a degree of uprightness, even in moments of rest, could signify respect or preparedness. Think of a guard dozing while still seated, or a priest resting in contemplation rather than fully giving over to sleep. These distinctions between deep unconscious sleep and lighter, more aware forms of rest were likely understood and utilized. The Maya's ability to find comfort and achieve rest in diverse postures highlights their adaptability and the fluid nature of their daily routines. It certainly made the concept of a dedicated sleep surface feel unnecessarily rigid, didn't it? As you reflect on the varied resting postures of the ancient Maya, your mind is drawn to another unique space where sleep, or at least profound repose, took on deep spiritual significance: sleep in sacred caves. Beyond the everyday dwellings, the Maya utilized natural underground caverns as powerful ritual sites, places where the boundaries between worlds were believed to thin and where profound rest could lead to transformative experiences. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this is the Maya reverence for caves as entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, and as sources of life-giving water. Caves were not just geological formations. They were living entities, sacred portals to the realm of the dead, the ancestors and powerful deities like the rain god Chak. Rituals, pilgrimages, and even burials took place within these dark, damp spaces. To sleep or rest within a sacred cave was therefore an act imbued with immense spiritual weight, a deliberate immersion into a liminal space. Imagine willingly seeking out a dark, echoing cavern for profound rest, knowing you were entering a realm teeming with spirits. It certainly made your modern sleep sanctuary seem rather mundane. For a quirky tidbit, consider the sensory experience of sleeping in a cave. The constant temperature and high humidity inside a cave, along with the absolute darkness once any torches were extinguished, and the muffled sounds from the outside world would create a unique environment for rest. The echoing drips of water, the subtle currents of air, and the earthy scent of the rock would have profoundly influenced the quality and nature of the repose. Historians still argue whether the primary draw of caves for resting was purely spiritual, or if the stable, cool environment also offered practical benefits for extended periods of contemplation or healing. It's enough to make you wonder if your noise-canceling headphones are just a modern attempt to recreate ancient cave silence. You certainly wouldn't expect a comfortable, soft mattress inside. Access to sacred caves was often restricted, typically reserved for priests, shamans, rulers, and other high-ranking individuals involved in specific rituals or vision quests. Commoners would likely have been excluded from prolonged stays in the deepest, most sacred chambers. For those who did enter, the experience of resting in such a place would have been distinct from everyday sleep in a hammock. The rest achieved in a sacred cave might not have always been deep unconscious sleep as we understand it. It could have been more of a meditative trance, a state of heightened awareness conducive to receiving visions, communing with spirits, or undergoing spiritual transformation. The inherent danger and profound sacredness of the environment would have contributed to an altered state of consciousness, even in moments of physical repose. The act of sleeping in a cave might have been a deliberate, symbolic death and rebirth, mirroring the journey through the underworld. Offerings and prayers would often accompany such periods of rest in caves. Ritual artifacts such as pottery, jade, or effigies have been found in many Maya cave sites, indicating their use as places of intense spiritual activity. The presence of these offerings further emphasizes that any rest taken within these spaces was not casual, but a purposeful engagement with the supernatural. This profound integration of sleep with spiritual questing sets Maya sleep apart, transforming a basic human need into a powerful ritual tool for connecting with the cosmos and the unseen forces of life and death. It certainly made a simple camping trip seem utterly devoid of spiritual significance. As you emerge from the echoing depths of a sacred Maya cave, your mind turns to the various methods ancient peoples might have employed to aid rest, leading us to the role of narcotics and herbs. While the ancient Maya possessed an extraordinary understanding of their natural environment, it's a delicate balance to understand what was used for medicine ritual or simply to induce a state of relaxation conducive to sleep. Their sophisticated knowledge of plants certainly included those with psychoactive or sedative properties. A mainstream historical fact highlighting the Maya's plant knowledge is their extensive use of medicinal plants documented in ancient texts and ethnographic studies. The ritual of the Bacabs and other colonial-era manuscripts provide detailed information on a vast pharmacopoeia of herbs used to treat various ailments, including pain, fever, and digestive issues. Given this deep botanical understanding, it's highly probable they explored plants that could alleviate sleeplessness or induce a calm state for ritual purposes. Imagine having a vast natural pharmacy at your fingertips, where every root and leaf held potential for healing or altering consciousness. It certainly made a trip to your modern drugstore seem rather limited in its offerings. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Mironon, controversial use of specific psychoactive substances during rituals that might precede or involve states of altered consciousness, akin to deep sleep or trance. While direct evidence for sleep aids in the modern sense is scarce, plants like the nyctae, plumeria species related to frangipani, or even certain mushrooms might have been consumed in ceremonial contexts to induce visions or facilitate communication, with the spirit world blurring the lines between sleep trance and ritual insight. Historians still argue whether these substances were used strictly for religious divination, or if some milder forms might have been employed by commoners for relaxation and ease of sleep after a hard day's work. It's enough to make you wonder if your chamomile tea has a far more potent ancient ancestor. You certainly wouldn't expect them to pop a modern sleeping pill. Specific plants that have been suggested in this context include species of datura, like Jimson weed, known for their powerful hallucinogenic and sedative properties, although their use would have been highly controlled and likely restricted to shamans or priests due to their toxicity. Milder sedatives might have included infusions from certain barks or leaves, or perhaps fermented beverages consumed in moderation. The goal was likely not to achieve a comatose state, but rather a relaxed, receptive mind open to dreams and spiritual experiences, or simply to alleviate physical discomfort that prevented rest. The consumption of cacao chocolate, a revered plant in Maya culture, while primarily a stimulant, could also have been prepared in ways that induced a sense of calm, particularly when combined with other herbs or consumed in specific ritual settings. The ritualistic consumption of substances meant they were not taken casually, but with deep respect for their power and the spirits they embodied. It's important to distinguish between medicinal use to promote sleep due to illness and recreational or ritualistic use. The Maya likely understood the therapeutic properties of many plants for various ailments that might disrupt sleep, such as pain or anxiety. Their healers, or Amen, would have possessed the empirical knowledge passed down through generations about which plants had a calming effect. This sophisticated plant wisdom underscores their intimate connection with their environment, where the jungle provided not just sustenance, but also the means to navigate the subtle states of human consciousness, including the elusive state of restful sleep. It certainly made a modern botanical garden seem like a living pharmacy. Having explored the potential for herbal aids to sleep, you now consider another vital aspect of Maya nights, especially in their bustling city-states, guarding the night sentinels. While the common family unit provided communal security in their homes, the larger settlements and ceremonial centers required dedicated protection. The Maya world, though rich in culture, was not without its threats, and ensuring safety during the vulnerable hours of darkness was a constant practical concern. A mainstream historical fact highlighting the need for vigilance is the evidence of fortifications and defensive structures around many major Maya cities. Sites like Tikal and Dos Pilas show signs of palisades, moats, and defensive walls, particularly in later periods of the classic Maya collapse. This indicates that warfare and raiding were not uncommon, making the protection of valuable resources, ceremonial centers, and sleeping populations a necessity. Imagine trying to get a peaceful night's sleep, knowing that external threats were a constant possibility, necessitating a vigilant watch. It certainly made the concept of a modern security system seem utterly basic. For a quirky tidbit, consider the hunt roll of dogs as informal guardians. While not sentinels in the human sense, domestic dogs were common companions in Maya households. Their keen senses of hearing and smell would have made them excellent early warning systems against nocturnal intruders, whether human or animal. Their barks and growls would have alerted sleeping families to any unusual presence, providing a natural layer of security. Historians still argue whether Maya dogs were primarily companions, hunting aids, or specifically bred for their guarding instincts. It's enough to make you wonder if your loyal pup is fulfilling an ancient role passed down through millennia. You certainly wouldn't expect a sleepy guard to be as effective as a vigilant animal. For larger settlements and important structures like temples, palaces, and elite residences, dedicated human sentinels would have been essential. These guards, likely drawn from the ranks of warriors or specialized retainers, would have patrolled the perimeters, stood watch at entrances, and maintained order throughout the night. Their presence would have been a silent, reassuring force for the sleeping populace within the core of the city. The routine of these sentinels would have been dictated by the natural rhythms of the night. They would have relied on their senses attuned to the subtle sounds of the jungle and the patterns of movement. Perhaps they carried torches to illuminate their patrols or relied on the moonlight to navigate the shadowy plazas and pathways. Their shifts would likely have been carefully timed, ensuring continuous coverage and allowing for their own periods of rest during the day or in designated barracks. The presence of these night guards also speaks to the value placed on order and protection within Maya society. For rulers, ensuring the safety of their people and their sacred sites was a fundamental responsibility, and a well-organized night watch would have been a visible manifestation of their authority and care. This vigilance extended even to moments of deep slumber, ensuring that the necessary activities of the city, whether ritualistic or practical, could continue without undue threat. It truly highlights the dynamic nature of a Maya night, not just a time for rest, but also for active protection against the unseen dangers that lurked in the darkness. It certainly made your quiet, secure neighborhood feel like a luxury. With the vigilant presence of sentinels now understood, you tune your senses to the very air around you, realizing that the Maya night had its own unique rhythm and presence. Soundscapes of Mayan night. Far from the muffled silence of modern bedrooms, the ancient Maya experienced sleep enveloped by a symphony of natural and human sounds. These weren't disturbances, but rather the familiar, often comforting backdrop of their nocturnal world, shaping the quality and texture of their slumber. A mainstream historical fact is the incredible biodiversity of the Mesoamerican jungle. The Maya lived within a vibrant ecosystem teeming with life. As daylight faded, a new chorus of sounds would emerge: the persistent chirping of cicadas, the croaking of frogs from nearby rivers and cenotes, the rustling of leaves as monkeys or other creatures moved through the canopy, and the haunting calls of nocturnal birds like owls. And of course, the distinctive, sometimes terrifying roar of the jaguar, the apex predator of their world. Imagine these sounds as your regular lullaby, a constant reminder of the wild world just beyond your dwelling. It certainly made your white noise machine seem rather limited in its repertoire. For a quirky tidbit, consider the yee sounds of communal human activity that would persist through the night. Even with the absence of artificial lighting, the segmented sleep pattern, remember that middle of the night awake period, meant that certain human sounds would still be present. This could include the quiet murmurs of conversation between family members, the gentle rustle of someone tending a low fire, the soft grinding of maize on a metate for early morning preparations, or the distant sounds of ritual drumming from a ceremonial center. Historians still argue whether these intermittent human sounds were a source of comfort indicating community presence, or if they sometimes made achieving deep, undisturbed sleep more challenging. It's enough to make you wonder if pin-drop silence was even a concept for them. You certainly wouldn't expect a perfectly quiet household. The very air would have resonated with these varied sounds. The constant humidity might have muffled some sharp noises, while the open structure of Maya homes meant that external sounds easily permeated their living spaces. The distinction between inside and outside sounds would have been far less rigid than in our well-insulated homes. For the Maya, these sounds were not just background noise, they were informative. The specific calls of certain birds could signal the approach of dawn. The distant growl of a jaguar could indicate danger, prompting heightened alertness even in sleep. The rhythm of communal grinding might signal the impending start of the new day's labor. Their auditory environment was a constant, rich source of information about their surroundings, integrating them deeply into the natural and social fabric of their world. This constant auditory engagement suggests a different kind of human consciousness, one perpetually attuned to its surroundings, even in moments of rest. Sleep for the Maya was likely not an escape from their environment, but a deeper immersion into its nocturnal rhythms. It highlights a profound contrast with modern life, where we often strive to eliminate all external sounds for perfect sleep, perhaps inadvertently disconnecting ourselves from the natural world. It certainly made a simple thunderstorm seem like a profound orchestral performance, didn't it? With the intricate soundscape of the Maya night still echoing in your ears, you now shift focus to how sleep, or the lack thereof, could have very real strategic implications, leading us to sleep and warfare strategy. In a world where conflicts between city-states were a recurring reality, the ability to rest effectively or to strategically disrupt an enemy's sleep could be a decisive factor in victory or defeat. A mainstream historical fact highlighting Maya warfare is the epigraphic and archaeological evidence of frequent conflicts between rival city-states. Stele murals and carved monuments often depict scenes of captive-taking battles and the destruction of rival polities. Kings often justified their rule through military victories, making warfare a significant part of political life. This constant potential for conflict meant that military strategy, including how warriors rested and how enemies were disrupted, was a crucial consideration. Imagine planning a military campaign where the very act of sleep became a strategic vulnerability or a weapon. It certainly made pulling an all-nighter for a project seem less daunting. For a quirky tidbit, consider the hot potential use of night raids or dawn attacks as a military tactic. Given the Maya's reliance on natural light, the hours of deepest darkness or the deceptive twilight of dawn would have offered ideal conditions for surprise attacks on unsuspecting settlements. Warriors might have marched through the night using their knowledge of the terrain and the cover of darkness to approach an enemy, silently striking when their adversaries were most vulnerable in sleep. Historians still argue whether the frequency of such tactics was primarily due to the element of surprise or if it also aimed to maximize the psychological impact of disrupting an enemy's rest. It's enough to make you reconsider sleeping through your alarm knowing the tactical advantage a waking enemy might gain. You certainly wouldn't expect a formal declaration of war before an attack. The ability of Maya warriors to manage their sleep patterns would have been critical for military endurance. Long marches through the jungle, periods of intense vigilance, and the physical demands of combat would have necessitated disciplined rest. Warriors might have learned to snatch short periods of sleep whenever possible, adapting to irregular schedules, perhaps taking turns guarding while others rested. This capacity for tactical napping would have been a valuable skill. Conversely, psychological warfare could have involved disrupting an enemy's sleep. Constant harassment, loud noises, or even false alarms throughout the night could have been used to induce sleep deprivation, weakening their morale and physical readiness before a direct confrontation. The jungle itself, with its myriad sounds, could be manipulated to create fear and uncertainty, blurring the lines between natural sounds and deliberate enemy actions. For the ruling elite, maintaining a state of readiness, even during rest, would have been paramount. Commanders would have needed to be able to wake quickly and make critical decisions. This likely meant their sleeping arrangements, while perhaps more comfortable, might also have been closer to communications and defensive points, allowing for rapid response to nocturnal threats. The relationship between sleep and warfare in the Maya world highlights how deeply integrated human biology was with their strategic thinking. Rest was not just a personal need, but a resource to be managed, exploited, or denied, a silent battleground in the ongoing conflicts between competing powers. It adds a layer of unexpected intensity to the quiet hours of the Maya night. It certainly makes you appreciate the relative peace of your modern sleep, doesn't it? Having considered the strategic implications of sleep in warfare, you now ponder the flip side of that coin. What happens when rest is denied? We turn our attention to sleep deprivation's consequences, as they might have manifested in the ancient Maya world. While modern science has extensively studied the effects of insufficient sleep, the Maya, without our clinical understanding, would have experienced its debilitating impact firsthand, particularly during periods of intense labor ritual or conflict. A mainstream historical fact highlighting periods of potential sleep deprivation is the intensive agricultural cycles and monumental construction projects undertaken by the Maya. During planting or harvesting seasons, or for the rapid construction of temples, pyramids, and palaces, large numbers of people would have been required to work long hours, often from before dawn until after dusk for sustained periods. This intense physical labor, coupled with natural light limitations, would inevitably have led to significant sleep debt for many. Imagine trying to precisely carve intricate glyphs or haul heavy stone blocks after several nights of inadequate rest. It certainly made the concept of a coffee break utterly unknown. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya understanding of mental states potentially linked to lack of sleep. While they wouldn't have used terms like cognitive impairment or exhaustion, they would have recognized the practical effects: reduced attention, irritability, slower reaction times, and perhaps even hallucinations during extreme deprivation. These symptoms might have been attributed to spiritual interference, a weakened soul, or a physical imbalance, rather than simply a lack of rest. Historians still argue whether some of the more extreme trance states or visions recorded in Maya texts might have been, at least in part, exacerbated by intentional or unintentional sleep deprivation during prolonged rituals. It's enough to make you wonder if your tired brain fog is an ancient, universally recognized state. You certainly wouldn't expect them to pop an energy drink to push through. The impact of sleep deprivation would have been multifaceted. Physically, individuals would experience profound fatigue, reduced strength, and a greater susceptibility to illness or injury. For a society heavily reliant on physical labor and skilled craftsmanship, this would have directly impacted productivity and the quality of work. A tired farmer might make mistakes in planting, or a weary artisan might botch an intricate carving, leading to tangible losses. Mentally, the effects would be equally detrimental. Decision-making crucial for rulers and leaders would become impaired. Warriors, as we've seen, would be less effective in combat. Priests attempting to interpret complex astronomical observations or divine messages might find their clarity diminished. The ability to recall information crucial for oral traditions and historical knowledge would suffer. Even social interactions could become strained as irritability and short tempers arose from exhaustion. In a society deeply connected to ritual, sleep deprivation could also have played a role in inducing altered states for spiritual purposes. Fasting and sleep deprivation were common elements in ascetic practices across many ancient cultures, designed to weaken the body and open the mind to spiritual experiences. While not a consequence in a negative sense, it highlights a deliberate manipulation of sleep patterns for specific profound aims. Ultimately, the Maya, through practical experience, would have understood the necessity of rest for sustained well-being and effective functioning, even if their explanation for its absence differed from ours. The periods of intense activity would inevitably be followed by times of recovery, allowing the body and mind to restore themselves. This practical, lived understanding of the human body's limits shaped their rhythms, even as they pushed those limits when necessity or ritual demanded it. It certainly made a good night's sleep feel like a precious commodity, didn't it? With the profound effects of sleep deprivation now understood, you lift your gaze from the weary human form to the vast cosmic canvas above, realizing how deeply intertwined Maya life and even their rest was with the heavens, astronomical alignments, and rest. For the ancient Maya, the movements of celestial bodies were not mere scientific curiosities. They were divine pronouncements influencing everything from agricultural cycles and ritual calendars to the very timing and nature of their sleep. A mainstream historical fact highlighting this connection is the one Maya's unparalleled mastery of observational astronomy and complex calendrical systems. They accurately track the cycles of the sun, moon, Venus, and other planets, recording these movements with astonishing precision in codices and on monumental stelae. These astronomical observations directly informed their sacred almanacs and guided the timing of religious ceremonies. Imagine living in a world where the stars dictated not just your planting schedule, but perhaps even the optimal time to seek a specific type of dream or to perform a nocturnal ritual that might precede a period of rest. It certainly made stargazing a far more serious business than a casual pastime. For a quirky tidbit, consider the specific constellations or celestial events that might have influenced sleeping or waking rhythms. While we don't have direct texts stating sleep when the Pleiades are overhead, it's plausible that certain constellations rising or setting could have signaled optimal times for specific activities, including the onset or conclusion of the night's main sleep segment or the middle of the night awake period we discussed earlier. The bright appearance of Venus, for instance, a critically important celestial body for the Maya, might have marked significant nocturnal or pre-dawn ritual times, potentially shortening sleep for those involved. Historians still argue whether such astronomical alignments dictated precise sleep schedules for the general populace, or were primarily a concern for astronomers' priests who might adjust their own rest for observation. It's enough to make you wonder if your alarm clock is a pale imitation of the cosmic clock ticking above them. You certainly wouldn't expect a Maya farmer to sleep through a celestial event critical for his crops. The long nights, particularly during the dry season, would have offered ample opportunity for detailed astronomical observation. Priests and scribes, the intellectual elite, would have dedicated many nocturnal hours to tracking the stars, making intricate calculations and recording their findings. This scholarly work would have certainly impacted their personal sleep patterns, perhaps leading to a form of segmented sleep, tailored to specific observational windows, ensuring they didn't miss crucial celestial phenomena. Their rest, in a sense, was subservient to the cosmic rhythm. Furthermore, certain ceremonial periods often tied to astronomical cycles, like solstices, equinoxes, or the heliacal rise of Venus, might have involved all-night vigils or rituals. For the general populace, these events would have disrupted normal sleep, requiring them to stay awake, participate in ceremonies, or simply witness the unfolding celestial drama. Such nights would be followed by periods of recovery, but the direct influence of the cosmos on their sleep-wake cycles would have been undeniable. The Mayas' deep reverence for the cosmos meant that the heavens were not just something to observe, but an active participant in their lives, guiding their daily actions and their nightly rest. Their sleep was thus intimately woven into the grand tapestry of the universe, a silent acknowledgement of the powerful forces that govern their world. This level of cosmic attunement certainly makes our modern reliance on digital timekeeping feel rather superficial, doesn't it? As your gaze descends from the celestial dance, you notice a profound connection between the sleeping and the eternal in Maya society. Sleeping with ancestors. For the ancient Maya, death was not a final separation, but a transition, and the deceased remained an active, if unseen, part of the family and community. This belief profoundly influenced where and how the living rested, often in surprising proximity to those who had passed on. A mainstream historical fact underpinning this practice is the common Maya custom of burying deceased family members within or directly beneath their homes. Archaeological excavations frequently uncover burials beneath house floors, in courtyards, or within special platforms associated with residential structures. This practice wasn't merely practical. It reflected a deep spiritual conviction that ancestors continued to exert influence, offering guidance, protection, and a spiritual connection to the living members of the lineage. Imagine sleeping soundly above the very ground where your great-grandparents rested. It certainly made the concept of a separate, distant cemetery a much more modern idea. For a quirky tidbit, consider the idea of active ancestors whose presence might be sought during sleep or dreams. Since dreams were portals to the spirit world, remember that from Section 4, sleeping in close proximity to ancestral remains could have been seen as a way to facilitate communication with them. A family might intentionally place their hammocks or mats near the burial spot, hoping to receive guidance or blessings from their forebears during their nightly slumbers. Historians still argue whether this proximity was primarily about maintaining spiritual connection, or if it also reinforced lineage claims and property rights. It's enough to make you wonder if your own ancestors are trying to send you messages through your dreams, regardless of where they're buried. You certainly wouldn't expect them to move their loved ones to a distant, isolated plot. This practice of intramural burial meant that the boundaries between the living and the dead were far more porous than in many modern cultures. The deceased were not gone in the sense of being entirely absent. They were merely in a different state of being, continuing their journey within Xibalba, the underworld. Sleeping in their presence would have fostered a continuous connection, a daily or nightly reminder of one's heritage and the cyclical nature of existence. The emotional experience of this would have been complex. While there would be grief, there would also be a sense of continuity and reassurance. The ancestors were guardians, part of the very foundation of the home. Their presence might have imbued the sleeping space with a sense of sacredness and protection, a comforting thought in the dark jungle night. Rituals surrounding ancestor veneration would also have influenced nightly routines. Before sleep, a family might offer a quiet prayer, a small amount of copal, or a portion of food to the ancestors buried beneath their feet, acknowledging their continued presence and seeking their benevolent influence. This constant interaction, even in the quiet hours of rest, underscores the holistic nature of Maya spirituality, where the physical and spiritual realms were deeply intertwined, and sleep offered a unique opportunity for communion. It certainly made the concept of a restless night take on a whole new spiritual meaning. Having explored the intimate connection between Maya sleep and their ancestors, you now feel the very air around you thick with the subtle presence of nature itself. The Petén Basin's humid nights. The ancient Maya heartland, a vast expanse of lowland rainforest in what is now Guatemala, was characterized by a distinct tropical climate that profoundly shaped every aspect of their lives, including how they found comfort and rest during the long, often sweltering hours of darkness. A mainstream historical fact highlighting this environment is the more seasonal variation in temperature and humidity in the Petén Basin. While the region is generally hot and humid year-round, there are distinct dry and wet seasons. The wet season, from roughly May to October, brought heavy rainfall and soaring humidity, often reaching close to 100%. Even during the dry season, the nights remain warm and often quite humid, especially after a sunny day. Imagine trying to get comfortable sleep in an environment where the air itself feels heavy and damp, and cooling down is a constant challenge. It certainly made air conditioning a dream beyond their wildest imaginings. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya's ingenious use of natural ventilation in their architectural design. Their wattle and daub homes, with their permeable walls and thatched roofs, were not sealed airtight structures. Instead, they allowed for significant airflow, creating a natural cooling system. The hammocks being suspended also facilitated air circulation around the body, further mitigating the effects of the heat and humidity. Historians still argue whether the primary design goal was ventilation quick construction or a combination of both, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of passive cooling techniques. It's enough to make you reconsider your tightly sealed, energy-intensive home for a more naturally breathable dwelling. You certainly wouldn't expect them to be complaining about stuffy rooms. The consistent warmth of the Petén Basin meant that the Maya had little need for heavy bedding. In fact, too much insulation would have led to uncomfortable sweating and disrupted sleep. Their reliance on light-woven mats and hammocks was a direct adaptation to this climatic reality, allowing for maximum heat dissipation from the body. You wouldn't find them bundled up in thick blankets unless perhaps during rare, cooler, dry season nights, or if they were ill. The humidity, while sometimes oppressive, also brought its own sounds and smells to the night. The dampness would enhance the earthy scent of the jungle floor. The blooming of nocturnal flowers would release their fragrances, and the constant presence of moisture would contribute to the distinct soundscape we discussed earlier, amplifying the croaks of frogs and the buzz of insects. These sensory inputs were an inherent part of their nightly experience. Furthermore, the threat of mold and mildew in such a humid environment would have necessitated materials that could breathe and dry quickly. Woven cotton and agave fibers, being natural and permeable, would have been ideal for this purpose, preventing the buildup of moisture that could lead to discomfort or skin irritation. Their sleeping arrangements were thus not just comfortable for human bodies, but also sustainable and appropriate for the challenging environment they inhabited. It highlights how intimately their daily lives, even their rest, were shaped by the raw power of their tropical home. It certainly made a cold, dry winter night seem like an alien concept for their slumber. Having felt the pervasive humidity of the Petén Basin nights, your focus now shifts to a more deliberate application of rest, sleep as a healing practice. For the ancient Maya, health and illness were deeply intertwined with spiritual balance and natural rhythms. Consequently, sleep or specific states of repose was not merely a passive recovery, but an active component of their sophisticated medicinal treatments, a time for the body and spirit to mend. A mainstream historical fact reinforcing this is the holistic nature of Maya medicine, which integrated herbal remedies, ritual practices, and spiritual beliefs. Illness was often seen as a spiritual imbalance, a consequence of angering deities breaking taboos or being targeted by malevolent forces. Therefore, healing involved not just treating symptoms, but restoring cosmic equilibrium. Sleep as a liminal state between waking and the spirit world, as you recall from Section 4, became a natural and vital part of this restorative process. Imagine a healer prescribing not just a medicinal brew, but a specific type of rest or dream incubation to facilitate recovery. It certainly made your doctor's hurried prescription for a pill seem rather one-dimensional. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Warhana concept of dream healing or visionary rest within shamanic practices. While not universal, it's plausible that individuals suffering from chronic ailments or psychological distress might have been encouraged to enter prolonged states of rest, perhaps aided by specific herbs or rituals to induce healing dreams or visions. These dreams could offer diagnostic insights, reveal remedies, or provide spiritual guidance for recovery. Historians still argue whether such practices were widely applied or reserved for more severe, spiritually rooted illnesses. It's enough to make you wonder if your deepest sleep could unlock hidden healing powers. You certainly wouldn't expect a Maya healer to simply tell you to get more rest without a spiritual component. When someone was ill, especially with a prolonged sickness, ensuring adequate and undisturbed rest would have been a primary concern for caregivers. The communal sleeping arrangements, while generally the norm, might have been adjusted to provide the ailing individual with a quieter, more comfortable space. Perhaps a hammock placed away from the main thoroughfare of the dwelling, or a specific mat near a source of gentle warmth. Herbal infusions, as discussed earlier, might have been administered not only for their symptomatic relief, but also for their calming or sedative properties, helping the patient achieve the necessary deep sleep for recovery. Pain management, crucial for restful sleep, would have relied heavily on the Mayas' extensive knowledge of analgesic plants. Beyond physical recovery, sleep was understood to facilitate spiritual restoration. A period of deep restorative sleep could allow the chul soul or life force to realign to gather strength or to ward off negative influences. It was a time for the body's innate healing mechanisms, guided by the spirit, to do their work unhindered. This contrasts sharply with modern medical interventions that often prioritize active treatments over the simple, profound power of rest itself. The Maya recognized that true healing often begins in the quiet, unconscious hours of slumber, a time when the body is free to repair and the spirit to reconcile. It certainly made a healing nap a truly sacred undertaking, didn't it? As you appreciate sleep's role in Maya healing, your awareness expands to the other quiet presences within the Maya household during the nocturnal hours. Animal companions and night guards. Beyond humans, domesticated animals played practical and often spiritual roles, contributing to the household's rhythms and providing an invaluable, if unspoken, layer of security during the vulnerabilities of night. A mainstream historical fact reinforcing this presence is the archaeological evidence of domesticated animals like dogs, turkeys, and occasionally peccaries within Maya settlements. Remains of these animals are often found in refuse middens associated with residential structures, indicating their close proximity to human dwellings. Dogs in particular were common companions, valued for hunting companionship and their keen senses. Imagine the comforting presence of a dog curled near your hammock, its soft breathing a familiar sound in the dark. It certainly made your modern security alarm seem rather impersonal. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya belief in Nahualismo, the spiritual connection between humans and animal companions, or Nahuales. Quirky. It was believed that each person had a spiritual coessence in the form of an animal which could share their fate. While Nahuales weren't necessarily the domesticated animals in the home, this deeper belief in the interconnectedness of humans and animals might have fostered a particular respect and awareness of their animal companions even during sleep. A dog's bark might not just be a warning, it could be a spiritual alert. Historians still argue whether the Nahual concept extended to everyday domesticated animals, or if it was reserved for specific wild species. It's enough to make you wonder if your pet's sleeping habits are subtly connected to your own. You certainly wouldn't expect them to treat a dog merely as a utilitarian tool. During the night, these animals would naturally contribute to the soundscape of the Maya household. The gentle snuffling of a dog, the quiet clucking of turkeys settling on a perch, or the rustle of a peccary in its pen would all have been familiar sounds of security and life. More importantly, their instincts made them excellent early warning systems. A dog's growl at an unusual sound, or a turkey's agitated clucking, would immediately alert sleeping inhabitants to potential intruders, whether human or wild animal. Beyond alarm systems, these animals provided a sense of warmth and companionship in the shared living space. A dog might curl up for warmth on cooler nights, or its very presence could offer psychological comfort to sleeping children. Their rhythmic breathing would become part of the background hum of communal sleep, contributing to a sense of safety and normalcy. The care of these animals would also have been integrated into nightly routines. Ensuring the animals were fed secured within the dwelling or a nearby enclosure and protected from predators would have been a constant consideration before settling down for rest. This mutual reliance, humans providing shelter and food, animals offering vigilance and companionship, underscores the Mayas' deep connection to the natural world and their practical approach to survival. It highlights how even the smallest members of their domestic ecosystem played a vital role in ensuring peaceful sleep. It certainly made a lonely, silent night in a modern apartment feel very isolated by comparison, didn't it? With the comforting presence of animal companions now part of your mental landscape of Maya sleep, you consider how these careful routines might be disrupted. Sleep during festivals and feasts. The ancient Maya calendar was punctuated by numerous elaborate ceremonies, vibrant festivals, and grand feasts, often involving music, dancing, and communal gatherings that stretched long into the night, significantly altering the normal rhythms of rest for individuals and entire communities. A mainstream historical fact highlighting these disruptions is the Maya's complex ceremonial calendar and the importance of major public rituals. Festivals were tied to astronomical events, agricultural cycles, or the veneration of specific deities and ancestors. These were not quiet affairs. They involved large gatherings in city plazas, often with elaborate processions, dramatic performances, music drums, conch shells, flutes dancing and feasting. Imagine the sheer energy of hundreds or thousands of people celebrating the sounds carrying across the entire city, making quiet sleep nearly impossible for anyone nearby. It certainly made your modern New Year's Eve party seem like a mild inconvenience. For a quirky tidbit, consider the wah role of intoxicating beverages like balshay during these festivities. Balshay, a fermented drink made from honey and the bark of the Lonchocarpus violaceus tree, was consumed ritually and socially. While its precise intoxicating effects are debated, it likely induced a state of altered consciousness and relaxation, which, while enjoyable, would certainly disrupt normal sleep patterns. People might pass out from consumption or be too stimulated to sleep. Historians still argue whether the purpose of such drinks was primarily spiritual intoxication, social bonding, or simply a way to manage discomfort during prolonged periods of activity. It's enough to make you think twice about that extra glass of wine before bed. You certainly wouldn't expect anyone to stick to a strict sleep schedule during a major public celebration. During these festivals, the normal segmented sleep pattern would likely be entirely abandoned for many. People might catch brief naps wherever possible, perhaps leaning against a wall in the quieter corners of a plaza, or dozing briefly in a hammock before rejoining the revelry. The energy of the crowd, the continuous sounds of music and chanting, and the general atmosphere of excitement would make deep, undisturbed sleep a rare luxury. For those directly involved in the rituals, the priests, rulers, and dancers, the disruption would be even more profound. They might undergo all-night vigils, perform elaborate dances for hours, or engage in ceremonies that lasted until dawn. Their sleep would be sacrificed for the sake of cosmic balance and community well-being, perhaps followed by a period of intense restorative sleep once the festivities concluded. The feasting aspect of these gatherings also played a role. Consuming large quantities of rich food, perhaps combined with stimulants like cacao, would further impact sleep quality. The body's digestive processes would be working overtime, potentially leading to discomfort or an inability to achieve deep rest. These festival periods highlight the flexibility of Maya sleep. While daily life might have followed predictable solar rhythms, the ceremonial calendar introduced deliberate and dramatic departures from this norm. Sleep in these instances became a communal sacrifice, a personal offering to the shared experience of celebration and spiritual devotion. It underscores that even the most basic human needs could be shaped and altered by the powerful forces of culture and ritual, transforming the very act of resting into something far more dynamic than mere unconsciousness. It certainly made a quiet night at home feel like a rare and precious gift. As the vibrant echoes of Maya festivals fade, leaving behind a desire for comfortable rest, you turn your attention to the materials that offered solace during the cool, humid nights. Textiles for warmth and comfort. While the Peten Basin might be warm, the nights could still bring a chill, especially in certain seasons or at higher elevations. The Maya skilled weavers and textile artists created fabrics that provided not just modesty and adornment, but also essential comfort for their sleeping hours. A mainstream historical fact highlighting Maya textile production is the cultivation of cotton and the sophisticated techniques of weaving. Cotton was a primary fiber grown extensively throughout the Maya lowlands. Women were expert weavers using backstrap looms to create a vast array of textiles from utilitarian cloths to exquisitely patterned and dyed fabrics. These textiles were used for clothing ritual purposes and crucially for domestic comfort, including sleeping. Imagine the rhythmic thwack-thwack of a backstrap loom as a regular sound in a Maya village producing the very fabric that would cradle them at night. It certainly made your mass-produced bed linens seem rather uninspired. For a quirky tidbit, consider the multi-purpose nature of Maya textiles, often doubling as bedding. A family's primary garments, such as cloaks, pati for men, or large rectangular cloths, by mantas for women, could easily be repurposed at night. These items, usually made of finely woven cotton, would offer a layer of warmth when draped over a sleeping body in a hammock or on a mat. This adaptability meant that what kept you modest by day could also keep you comfortable by night, minimizing the need for specialized bedding as we understand it. Historians still argue whether certain patterns or weaves were specifically favored for sleeping cloths, or if all textiles served a dual purpose based on their availability and fineness. It's enough to make you wonder if your favorite comfy blanket has a much more versatile ancestor. You certainly wouldn't expect them to have a separate set of sleepwear beyond their daily clothes. Beyond personal garments, larger woven mats would have been fundamental. Made from reed's palm fibers or woven cotton, these mats provided a soft, clean surface for sleeping on the ground or on elevated platforms. They could be easily rolled up and stored during the day, maintaining the versatility of the living space. For cooler nights or for those desiring extra cushioning, multiple layers of these mats might be used. The fineness of the weave and the quality of the fibers would, as you might recall from our discussion on social status, indicate the sleeper's position. Royal and elite individuals would have access to the softest, most finely spun cotton textiles, perhaps even adorned with featherwork or embroidery, providing a luxurious experience. Commoners would use more utilitarian but still effective weaves. The Maya's mastery of natural dyes would also have contributed to the aesthetic of their sleeping textiles. Rich colors derived from cochineal, indigo, and other plant sources would have made even utilitarian cloths visually appealing. Imagine a simple woven mat, perhaps dyed with subtle geometric patterns, providing both comfort and a touch of beauty to the sleeping space. Ultimately, these textiles were crucial for managing the physiological needs of sleep within the Maya environment. They provided warmth when needed, absorbed humidity, offered a layer of softness, and contributed to the overall comfort that allowed for restorative rest. Their creation was a testament to the skill of Maya artisans and the practical ingenuity of a civilization deeply connected to the natural resources around them. It certainly made your pursuit of the perfect thread count seem like a very modern obsession. From the humble yet versatile textiles of the commoner's dwelling, your perspective now elevates dramatically to consider sleeping in royal palaces. While the basic technology of hammocks and mats likely remained the sleep environment of a Maya ruler or high noble was dramatically different from that of a commoner imbued with opulence, ritual significance, and the constant awareness of power and political demands. A mainstream historical fact underscoring royal living is the monumental scale and intricate decoration of Maya palaces. These multi-room masonry complexes, often built on elevated platforms within city centers, featured multiple courtyards, long corridors, and numerous chambers, often adorned with stucco sculpture murals and carved glyphic texts. Unlike the single-room commoner homes, these structures allowed for a greater degree of separation, even if absolute privacy, as we know it, was still rare. Imagine the coolness of thick stone walls surrounding your resting place, a stark contrast to the permeable wattle and daub. It certainly made your average modern bedroom feel rather cramped and unceremonious. For a quirky tidbit, consider the presence of carved thrones or benches within royal chambers, which might have served as places for dignified rest or formal audience, even during the night. While not soft beds, these permanent stone or plastered structures could have been adorned with luxurious textiles, providing a semi-reclined resting place, suitable for a ruler who might need to receive messengers or conduct affairs at any hour. This blurring of throne and resting place suggests that even sleep was integrated into the continuous performance of royal authority. Historians still argue whether these benches were primarily for formal seating, or if they truly functioned as sleeping platforms, especially for brief, powerful rests. It's enough to make you wonder if your office chair could be transformed into a regal napping spot. You certainly wouldn't expect a king to be caught sprawling undignifiedly. Within these sprawling palaces, a ruler's designated sleeping area would likely have been in a larger central chamber, or perhaps an alcove designed for maximum comfort and security. While still employing finely woven hammocks or thick soft mats, these would have been of the highest quality, spun from the finest cotton, possibly dyed with rare pigments, and perhaps adorned with precious feathers or jade beads reflecting the ruler's immense wealth and divine connection. The atmosphere in a royal sleeping chamber would have been distinct. While still open to the jungle's sounds, the thick stone walls would muffle them to a degree. Instead, the subtle sounds of attendance guards and perhaps the distant murmur of ongoing court business might have permeated the space. The air might carry the scent of burning copal used for ritual purification or the fragrance of exotic flowers brought in to adorn the royal chambers. Access to warmth and light would also be superior. While commoners relied on simple hearths, royal chambers might have had more elaborate brazier arrangements for warmth on cooler nights, or to allow for prolonged periods of light for reading, writing, or conducting late-night strategic discussions. The presence of numerous attendants, as discussed previously, would also extend into the night, ensuring the ruler's needs were met and their safety assured. Even in slumber, the ruler's body was a sacred vessel perpetually guarded. This contrast in sleeping environments vividly illustrates the immense social and political chasm within Maya society. For the elite, sleep was not just personal rest, but an extension of their public persona, conducted within structures that literally embodied their power, even as the subtle sway of the hammock echoed the more egalitarian experience of slumber shared by all Maya people. It certainly made the idea of roughing it on a camping trip utterly unimaginable for a monarch. Having witnessed the opulent yet still distinct sleep of Maya royalty, your thoughts now drift to the darker side of nocturnal experience, the burden of insomnia. Even in ancient societies deeply attuned to natural rhythms, the inability to find rest would have been a profoundly unsettling and debilitating condition. While the Maya wouldn't have had a clinical term for insomnia, they would have keenly felt its effects, perhaps attributing sleeplessness to spiritual disruption, physical ailment, or even malevolent forces. A mainstream historical fact underscoring the universal nature of sleep disturbance is the physiological impact of prolonged sleeplessness on the human body and mind, regardless of culture or era. Lack of sleep leads to fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, impaired judgment, and a compromised immune system. These effects would have been as real for a Maya farmer or priest as they are for us today. Imagine trying to perform complex astronomical calculations or endure a long agricultural workday after a night of tossing and turning in your hammock. It certainly made the absence of modern sleep aids a truly daunting challenge. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya's potential explanations for persistent sleeplessness, often linked to spiritual causes. If someone suffered from chronic insomnia, it might not have been seen as a purely physical problem, but as a symptom of a dislocated Chulel soul, the influence of an angry ancestor, or even a curse. This spiritual interpretation would lead to different approaches to treatment, involving rituals, offerings, or consultations with shamans, rather than just seeking quiet rest. Historians still argue whether such spiritual explanations provided comfort and a framework for understanding, or merely added another layer of anxiety to the suffering. It's enough to make you wonder if your own restless nights are secretly a sign of cosmic disapproval. You certainly wouldn't expect them to recommend a warm glass of milk. For the Maya, a persistent inability to sleep would have been a significant concern. It could lead to reduced productivity in daily tasks, making hunting, farming, or craft work more difficult and less effective. In a society where physical labor was paramount, constant fatigue would have had tangible economic consequences for a household. Socially, an insomniac might become withdrawn, irritable, or difficult to live with, potentially straining communal relationships within the shared living space. Their inability to participate fully in daily activities due to exhaustion might also lead to social isolation or a diminished role within the community. Spiritually, the burden of insomnia could be particularly distressing. If dreams were considered important conduits for divine messages, then sleeplessness would represent a severed connection, a blocking of vital spiritual communication. This could lead to anxiety about missing crucial guidance or failing to appease deities or ancestors, exacerbating the problem. Treatments for insomnia, therefore, would likely have been multifaceted, combining practical and spiritual approaches. Herbal remedies aimed at relaxation, as discussed in Section 12, might be used alongside ritual purification appeals to benevolent deities or dream incubation ceremonies designed to restore the flow of spiritual guidance and thus restful sleep. The Mayas' approach to insomnia underscores their integrated view of human well-being, where physical, mental, and spiritual health were inseparable. It certainly made the simplicity of counting sheep seem like a profound medical intervention. From the unsettling burden of sleeplessness, you now observe how the very pulse of Maya life dictated their periods of rest, sleep, and agricultural cycles. For a civilization deeply rooted in farming, particularly the cultivation of maize, the demands of the land directly influenced the rhythms of their days and nights, often overriding individual preference in favor of collective necessity. A mainstream historical fact highlighting this connection is the centrality of maize corn to Maya subsistence and cosmology. Maize was not just a crop, it was a sacred plant believed to be the substance from which humanity was created. The agricultural cycle from clearing land, slash and burn, to planting, weeding, and harvesting was the backbone of their economy and significantly influenced their daily routines, including when and how much they slept. Imagine your entire life being orchestrated by the growth cycle of a single plant. It certainly made your varied work schedule seem incredibly flexible. For a quirky tidbit, consider the intensive labor demands during the milpa cycle, which would drastically alter sleep patterns. The milpa system, a traditional rotating cultivation method, involved periods of intense activity, clearing and burning the forest often in the dry season, which could involve long, exhausting days. Then came the planting season, often coinciding with the first rains, requiring communal effort and long hours. The harvest season, too, demanded sustained effort. During these peak times, sleep would likely be shortened and perhaps less regular, caught in snatch moments of rest whenever possible. Historians still argue whether the physical demands of agriculture led to a culture of constant fatigue, or if Mayans developed highly efficient methods of labor that balanced work with necessary rest. It's enough to make you appreciate the invention of modern farm machinery. You certainly wouldn't expect a Maya farmer to take a leisurely Sunday nap during planting season. During the less demanding parts of the agricultural year, such as the dry season after the harvest was complete, or during periods of fallow sleep patterns, might have become more regular and extended. This would have been a time for the community to recover from intense labor, engage in more leisurely activities, or dedicate more time to craft social gatherings, and perhaps longer segments of communal sleep. The timing of sleep would also be influenced by the need to protect crops. During certain phases of growth or as harvest approached, farmers might have had to maintain vigil over their fields at night, protecting them from pests, animals, or even human thieves. This added layer of responsibility would directly impact their ability to achieve uninterrupted rest. Furthermore, the Mayas' deep connection to the natural world meant that weather patterns, rainfall, drought, and temperature shifts, which directly impacted their crops, would indirectly influence their sleep. A sudden, unexpected dry spell might necessitate late-night irrigation efforts, while a torrential downpour could force an early cessation of work. Their sleep was thus inextricably linked to the unpredictable rhythms of nature and the demanding cycles of their primary food source. This continuous negotiation between human need and natural imperative underscores the practical realities that shaped the daily and nightly lives of the ancient Maya. It certainly made a simple trip to the grocery store for your food seem like an unimaginable convenience. As you absorb the relentless rhythm of Maya agriculture, your focus shifts to another element that defined their nights, offering comfort, light, and protection: the role of fires at night. Beyond cooking, the hearth played a crucial, multifaceted role in the nocturnal life of a Maya family, influencing temperature, visibility, and even warding off unwelcome visitors. A mainstream historical fact underscoring the importance of fire is the absence of widespread artificial lighting technology, beyond torches or small oil lamps for specific tasks. For most commoners, the central hearth fire would have been the primary source of light and warmth within their wattle and daub homes once the sun set. This made the management of fire a constant, essential task, extending into the hours of rest. Imagine your entire evening being illuminated by the flickering glow of a single fire, its warmth dictating where you congregated. It certainly made your brightly lit home feel like a dazzling palace. For a quirky tidbit, consider the subtle psychological comfort and security provided by a continuously burning low fire. Beyond mere warmth, the constant presence of a glowing ember or a quietly flickering flame would have offered a sense of protection against the absolute darkness of the jungle night. It could deter nocturnal animals from approaching the dwelling and provide a reassuring visual anchor in the communal sleeping space. Historians still argue whether the maintenance of a low fire through the night was primarily for warmth and practical light, or if it also served a symbolic purpose representing the continuity of life in the presence of benevolent spirits. It's enough to make you wonder if your cozy fireplace is tapping into an ancient human need for a glowing hearth at night. You certainly wouldn't expect them to just put out the fire completely and plunge into total darkness. The tasks associated with the fire would extend into the sleeping hours, particularly during the segmented sleep cycle. Someone might rise during the middle of the night awake period to tend the embers, adding small pieces of wood to keep it alive without creating a roaring blaze. This maintenance ensured that the fire could be easily rekindled for morning cooking without the arduous process of starting anew. The heat from the fire, especially on cooler nights or during the dry season, when temperatures could dip, would radiate through the single-room dwelling, providing essential warmth for those sleeping on mats or in hammocks. Its presence would also help to dry the humid air, making the sleeping environment more comfortable. Furthermore, the smoke from the fire, while managed to avoid filling the dwelling excessively, often escaping through the thatched roof, would have offered some protection against mosquitoes and other biting insects, contributing to a more restful sleep. The distinct smell of wood smoke would have been an intrinsic part of the nightly sensory experience, a comforting scent of home. The hearth, therefore, was not just a place for preparing food. It was the heart of the Maya home, providing a focal point for communal life, even in the depths of night. Its management, even in slumber, reflected a profound understanding of practical needs and environmental adaptation, ensuring that sleep was as safe and comfortable as possible within their means. It certainly made a modern electric heater seem utterly devoid of character. From the flickering comfort of the nightly fire, your journey now descends into the profound spiritual significance of Maya, rest a journey to Xibalba, sleep and death. For the ancient Maya, the line between living and dying and waking and sleeping was far more porous than in many modern cultures. Sleep was often viewed as a temporary nightly descent into the underworld Xibalba, a perilous but ultimately vital journey that mirrored the ultimate transition of death. A mainstream historical fact highlighting this connection is the Sunyur, centrality of Xibalba in Maya cosmology, particularly as depicted in the Popol Vuh, the sacred Quiche Maya text. Xibalba was not a hell of eternal damnation, but rather a complex, dangerous realm ruled by the lords of death, a place of trial and transformation through which heroic figures like the hero twins must pass. The sun itself was believed to journey through the underworld at night to be reborn each morning. This cosmic journey of daily death and rebirth provided a powerful metaphor for human sleep. Imagine your nightly slumber as a symbolic journey into a perilous, spirit-filled underworld from which you hope to emerge reborn with the dawn. It certainly made a simple nightlight seem utterly insufficient for protection. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Hunnite iconographic elements often found in funerary contexts that also relate to sleep or repose. Jade beads symbolizing water and rebirth were often placed in the mouths of the deceased, linking them to watery underworld journeys. Furthermore, the Maya practice of burying individuals in a flexed or fetal position, sometimes within or beneath their homes, remember from section 18, can be interpreted as a return to the earth, a preparation for rebirth, or a pose of eternal rest, blurring the lines between sleep and final repose. Historians still argue whether specific items placed with the dead were literal provisions for an underworld journey or symbolic representations of their spiritual state. It's enough to make you wonder if your cozy fetal sleeping position is a primal echo of ancient beliefs about rebirth. You certainly wouldn't expect them to have a fear of sleeping on their backs. This metaphorical connection meant that the act of falling asleep was not just a physical transition, but a spiritual one. It was a moment of vulnerability, a temporary relinquishing of waking consciousness to enter a realm where different rules applied. Dreams as portals to the spirit world were therefore direct experiences of this nocturnal journey, bringing back messages from the ancestors or premonitions from the deities encountered in Xibalba. For rulers and elites, this connection was even more pronounced. Their sleep, like their lives, was imbued with cosmic significance. Their ability to journey successfully through Xibalba in dreams, to commune with powerful beings, and to emerge reborn with the sun would validate their divine authority and ensure the continuity of their lineage and city-state. Royal burial chambers, often deep within temple pyramids, further emphasize this symbolic journey, literally placing the deceased within the earth, mirroring the sun's nightly descent. The fear of not waking from sleep or of being trapped in Xibalba would have been a real concern, underscoring the importance of proper rituals and the protection of benevolent forces. The dawn, therefore, was not just the start of a new day, but a sacred moment of rebirth, a triumphant return from the underworld. This profound symbolic link between sleep and death infused every Maya night with a deeper meaning, transforming a biological necessity into a fundamental part of their cosmic narrative and spiritual existence. It certainly made your casual wake-up call feel like a miracle of daily resurrection. Having navigated the symbolic depths of Xibalba, you now re-emerge into the vibrant present, realizing that even after centuries, the echoes of these ancient practices continue to resonate. Echoes in modern Maya sleep. While much has changed, particularly with the arrival of modern technologies and cultural influences, many indigenous Maya communities today still retain fascinating remnants of their ancestors' sleep habits, subtly blending tradition with contemporary life. A mainstream historical fact highlighting continuity is the continued widespread use of hammocks in many indigenous communities across Mesoamerica. Despite the availability of modern beds, hammocks remain a preferred sleeping solution in many rural areas, cherished for their comfort, air circulation, and cultural heritage. This enduring preference speaks volumes about their practical efficacy in the climate and their deep roots in Maya identity. Imagine walking into a contemporary Maya home and seeing hammocks strung alongside perhaps a modern radio or a simple light bulb. It certainly made your pursuit of the latest sleep tech seem like a fleeting trend. For a quirky tidbit, consider the high persistence of communal sleeping patterns, particularly for families with young children. While individual bedrooms are more common in urbanized areas in many traditional Maya households, especially those in more rural settings or with limited space co-sleeping or family sleeping arrangements, are still very much the norm. Infants and young children often sleep with their parents, reinforcing family bonds and facilitating breastfeeding throughout the night. Historians still argue whether this is purely a matter of practicality and limited resources, or if it reflects a deeply ingrained cultural value of collective presence and nurturing that has survived centuries of external influence. It's enough to make you wonder if your separate bedroom is a relatively new concept in human history. You certainly wouldn't expect a modern Maya mother to strictly sleep train her infant into a separate room. The influence of natural rhythms, while sometimes competing with artificial light and modern work schedules, still plays a role. In communities without reliable electricity, the sun continues to dictate the primary sleep-wake cycle, encouraging earlier bedtimes and rises than in urban centers. The sounds of the natural world, though perhaps interspersed with distant motor sounds, remain a part of their nocturnal soundscape. The spiritual connection to dreams and ancestors, while perhaps not as universally explicit as in ancient times, often persists in subtle ways. Elders or traditional healers in some communities may still interpret dreams for guidance, or family altars may be maintained where offerings are left, subtly connecting the sleeping, living with the watchful dead. The concept of a spiritual self that might journey during sleep is not entirely lost. Even the materials used for comfort reflect ancient practices. Hand-woven textiles, often made on backstrap looms with traditional patterns, continue to be used as blankets and wraps, providing warmth and a connection to ancestral weaving traditions. These aren't just functional items. They are cultural artifacts embodying a legacy of craftsmanship and comfort. The echoes of ancient Maya sleep habits in modern communities serve as a powerful reminder of cultural resilience. Despite centuries of change, the practical wisdom and deep-seated traditions surrounding rest have endured, adapting to new realities while retaining a core identity. It shows how profoundly human habits, once established and intertwined with cosmology and environment, can resist the relentless march of time. It certainly makes you appreciate the deep roots of human behavior, doesn't it? As the echoes of ancient traditions gently merge with modern life, we reach the culmination of our journey, a moment to reflect on the deeper insights offered by their unique approach to rest. The quiet wisdom of Maya sleep. The ancient Maya, without our technological advancements or clinical understandings, developed sleep habits profoundly shaped by their environment, cosmology, and social structures, offering us a window into alternative ways of connecting with the world even in slumber. A mainstream historical fact that encapsulates this wisdom is the Maya's profound reverence for cyclical time. Unlike our linear perception of time, the Maya viewed it as cyclical, with endless repetitions and renewals reflected in their calendars, rituals, and even the daily cycle of sun's descent into Xibalba and its rebirth. This worldview naturally integrated sleep not as a break from life, but as an essential part of its continuous flow, a nightly renewal that mirrored the cosmic order. Imagine letting your body's rhythms align with the grand cycles of the universe rather than the relentless ticking of a clock. It certainly made the concept of wasting time sleeping utterly illogical. For a quirky tidbit, consider the Maya's likely lack of a strong concept of personal space and sleep as we define it today. While we seek individual bedrooms, soundproofing, and privacy for rest, the Maya's communal sleeping arrangements fostered a constant, intimate connection with family. This suggests a different understanding of boundaries where security and belonging were derived from collective presence, even in slumber. Historians still argue whether this constant proximity fostered deeper family bonds or created subtle, unacknowledged tensions. It's enough to make you wonder if your desire for solitude at night is a cultural construct rather than a fundamental human need. You certainly wouldn't expect a Maya individual to demand a quiet room for introspection. The Maya teach us the power of environmental attunement. Their hammocks, their open-air homes, their reliance on natural light and soundscapes all were ingenious adaptations to their tropical environment. They didn't fight nature. They integrated with it, allowing the rhythms of the jungle, the heat and the sounds to shape their sleep rather than striving to create an artificial, controlled environment. This suggests a deeper harmony with their surroundings, where rest was a participation in rather than an escape from the natural world. Their understanding of dreams as portals to spiritual realms reminds us of the Renishanon richness of the unconscious mind. For them, sleep was not just a time for physical repair, but for spiritual revelation, a direct line to ancestral wisdom and divine guidance. This perspective elevates sleep from a mere biological function to a profound opportunity for insight and connection, challenging us to consider the deeper potential of our own nocturnal journeys. Finally, the very adaptability of Maya sleep, from segmented rest to all-night festival vigils, from practical hammocks to sacred cave slumbers, underscores the resilience and flexibility of human sleep patterns. They remind us that there isn't one right way to sleep and that cultural, environmental, and spiritual factors profoundly shape how we find our repose. Their quirky habits, when viewed through this lens, reveal a quiet wisdom, a harmonious integration of rest into the grand tapestry of life and cosmos. It certainly makes your pursuit of the perfect night's sleep feel both overly complicated and perhaps a little disconnected from the deeper rhythms of existence. Now, as the jungle sounds fade into the gentle hum of your own space and the ancient stars begin to twinkle faintly in your mind's eye, allow the quiet wisdom of the Maya to settle over you. Imagine the soft sway of a hammock, the distant calls of the night, and the comforting presence of ancestors nearby. Let go of the need for perfect silence or absolute control, and simply surrender to the ancient art of rest. Feel yourself gently suspended between worlds, ready for whatever dreams the night may bring. Sweet dreams.